Hi, welcome to Fireside with Peter Adkison here on Gen Con TV. I am Peter Adkison, and I'm really happy you could join us today. On this show, we go on the in search of the untold stories behind your favorite games. And in this season, we have teamed up with the Dungeon Masters Guild, and they are introducing us to new voices in Dungeons and Dragons. And one of those new voices with us today is Justice Arman. Justice has worked on a whole bunch of projects. I'm having trouble deciding which ones I want to get to first. But also, let's see, there was the Curse of Strahd. Now he said the legendary edition box set of Curse of Strahd by Beadle and Grimm's, and also Devil's Advocate, a guide to infernal contracts. Okay, I'm going to get into that, and all sorts of more. So, yeah, hey,
Hey,
and you're a goblin, you said. Now, is that right?
it's a real title. Yeah, it's a goblin.
Okay, you got to explain that to me.
Yeah, so Beetle and Grimm's, we've always had this thing about goblins, and I guess it started as like a warehouse joke that, oh, the goblins in the warehouse are going to ship this to you. But we got really into it and we were making business cards, and such to the point that we're all chatting as a company, and we're like, which kind of goblin am I going to be?
Oh
We're like,
yeah,
what if you
sure.
be the face goblin and I'll be this? And eventually we stopped. We're like, our title should probably also be, they should explain what we are, right? Because we're putting these on business cards, and we like erased half the stuff we had put into them.
So what is your title then?
I,
What's your goblin title? You have a
I'm
goblin
the
title?
event coordinator goblin. I'm
Oh,
also a
event
writer
coordinator.
goblin.
Like going around to conventions and stuff and running events during COVID?
Exactly like that. Coordinating all these conventions and learning about streaming.
Okay, well, streaming, that makes sense.
Now
Well,
that
great.
one,
Well, thank you for being on our show today. This is great to have you.
yeah, thank you for having me.
So I'd like to start with a little bit of background. Like I always like to, I'm always very curious people's stories. Where did you grow up? Where were you raised?
Yeah, so I grew up in Nashville, Tennessee.
Ooh,
Um, yeah, so Music City. I grew up with country music before the snap tracks.
okay.
Uh, so some Josh Turner, early Brad Paisley, and some of the old legends at the Grand Ole Opry. I did go through a country music phase, and I
I'm
do play the
I
guitar.
I've gone through two country music
See,
phases.
there you go. It's a good phase. It's a good phase. Yeah, so I grew up in Nashville, Tennessee. Technically a little bit outside of Nashville in a small town. And
Did your family play games a lot? I mean, did you grow up in a family that played games?
no, I'm the youngest of four, and I am definitely the nerd in my family. Like way high outranking all the others in nerddom. Like my oldest sister was super goth. My brother was a football player. And then I was like, let's play some video games. So I made friends around the neighborhood pretty fast because I couldn't get anybody into my house to play games with me.
Oh wow. So did you you said video games. Did you play a lot of video games growing up then? And
Yeah. The way it is, you're on a bus, you meet some kids on the bus, they become your friends, you're always over each other's houses. Uh, one of them has a PlayStation, the other one has, a Nintendo, and you alternate, and you just, slumber parties and lots of junk food, and just laughing and stuff. So a lot of video games and some board games, but TTRPGs I didn't really get into until later.
so take me over that. Was that so let's go to that. Is that high school, college, or where did you go to school? Did you go to college?
Yeah. So I did my undergraduate. I
I
started
happen
at
to know you did because I
yeah.
know you were
I
you're like a surgeon or something, right? You have to go to
oh,
school for that,
I
pretty
yeah,
sure.
I'm a surgical clinic manager. I started at Middle Tennessee State University and transferred to Brigham Young University in Utah. And I was hanging out at my apartment complex one day. We were just off of on-campus housing. And this guy, Colin, came up to me and he was like, "Hey, do you want to play Dungeons and Dragons this Sunday?" And I was like, "Hello."
You
And
didn't know your life was going to change here.
no, I didn't. I was like, "Is that nerd game that they play where they're in the basement and you have like
Yeah,
the
yeah,
big thing up?" And he's
that's the
like, "It
one.
is that." And I said, I was like, I don't know if I'm quite there." And he said, he's like, hey, you can play whatever you want. I was like, can I be a powdered wig wearing minotaur named Beethoven? He was like, yeah, come over like an hour early and we'll get that taken care of for you. And yeah, I was there every weekend since. And that was 3.5. That was 2013. So
Wow. 3.5. Well, that's a good addition coming on. Yeah.
yeah. Started with 3.5 and then jumped right into fifth when because it was I think fifth edition started 2014, and I was just walking by a game store in downtown Provo, and I saw like the big advert for the new edition. And I kind of wanted to be a dungeon master, but I was kind of overwhelmed with all of the books that already had been out in other games and other editions. But since there was only one book, I was like, I can do this. So I started playing.
Right. Yeah. Great. So now, but I want to go back to your first time playing Dungeons and Dragons. Like, what was it like? Did the big light go on all of a sudden? Did it take time? Like,
yeah,
playing is really different than playing a video game, you know?
Yeah, for sure. It definitely took time. When I first started playing, it was kind of like, I don't know. I didn't understand anything that was going on, honestly. I asked my DM when
I was GMing the first time and I didn't know what anything was going on either.
You know, there was a bunch of feats. The book was this thick. I didn't own the books. Our GM had all the books, and I said, you know, which dice do I throw? And he's like, the really round one. And I'm like, this one? He's like, no, that's a D12. I'm like, this one? He's like, no, that's a D4. I'm like, this one. He's like, yes, take that one and put it away from the others because you're going to be rolling that one a lot.
Your D4 was really round, huh?
Well, yeah, they're a hazard. You have to polish them down. But yeah, no, I didn't. It was enjoyable, and I think the community is what drew me in. Like having a table of people who, you know, I could hang out with, who were all really nerdy, who, you know, we could chat, play games, and just hang out afterwards. And over time, I think that habit built up, and I remembered that, you know, when I moved to Houston, I didn't miss the community so much as I missed the game and the community. So I started running my own table in Houston.
Right. But at some point there must have been an aha moment, because you've gone on to, we're going to get to some of your credits. You've done a lot of design work and writing work on Dungeons and Dragons. I mean, that's why you're here. You have credits, dude. You've done stuff. So, when did you fall in love with Dungeons and Dragons?
I think, that's a good question. I think it was when I became a dungeon master, because I fell in love with the prep. I liked putting music into my games. I liked thinking about the stories and how different characters would act. I liked the freedom of it, where, you know, there weren't any, well, I guess there are bugs. Dungeon masters have bugs, but there weren't bugs in that you can't go here. Here's an invisible wall. It was always, it's sort of like the DM is the bottleneck. And if you can improvise or you can push something off to the next week, you can always explore another theme or another world or fight a new villain. And I think that's when things really started to click. And from there, you know, I did so much writing for my campaigns, and I love prepping for session. And I'm a chronic over prepper. And I mean, my notes were so detailed, and I couldn't show anyone them because all my friends were my players. And so I would tell people who didn't understand Dungeons and Dragons, and I was back in the position where I was when I was a kid, where I have this cool stuff I want to share, but the people who work in healthcare in Texas are not interested in Dungeons and Dragons for the most part. And so I wanted to write something and share it with a community that understood it. And that's kind of how I found the DM's Guild. Was that desire to share outside my table.
Yeah, well, let's go into that. I mean, that was actually, you know, that's certainly the next step here. Like, yeah, how did you get into writing, you know, publishing Dungeons and Dragons materials?
Yeah. So it started with an annual Halloween one shot that I always did for my group. The second or third year of doing that, I decided to type up my notes in such a way that it would be detailed enough that if I wanted to share it and help somebody else run the game that I ran, like at my local game store, I was going to print it off and hand it to them. And so I wrote this adventure called Heart Hunt because I thought it would be fun if you could run it at Halloween or at Valentine's Day. So I wrote that up, I put it in GM Binder, and I put it on the DM's Guild, and I forgot about it for like 6 or 7 months. And MT Black, he's a writer in the D&D community. He's written for Baldur's Gate, Descent into Avernus, and a lot of other stuff. Well, he was doing a contest where you could essentially write a one-page adventure, submit it, and possibly win money or win, certain DM's Guild bundle or something like that. Sure. So I thought to myself, like, well, I've sort of done this once. I can write a one-page adventure. So I found a layout person to put everything together, and I drew the drawings and the map for the adventure. And I submitted that to him. And when I processed my submission, I needed to give him a DM's Guild address. So I logged in because I actually still had one from Heart Hunt. And there was money in my account, and I was so confused when it happened. I was like, what? I was like, what the hell? Why is there money in my account? I thought maybe I owed money, or like somebody was using my identity or something like that. But it was because my title was Pay What You Want, and 40 people had given me some money, or I think 90, and so it was like $40. And I don't know, that felt really good. And after I turned that one-page adventure in, I said, well, I wonder what it would be like if my adventure cost more than $1. And I invested a little bit in it and spent more time on it and just wrote something for this platform. And that's kind of where I started with Oath of the Aesir and Devil's Advocate.
Right. Well, that's cool. So let's go to Aesir. Oath of the Aesir. This is a Norse pantheon sort of inspiration. I understand you're a fan of the Norse mythology.
Yeah. Neil Gaiman's Norse mythology is, I've probably listened to that book 5 times now with him narrating it. I love all the Norse myths. I love the new God of War games, and I love how trickstery Loki is. And I don't know. I like Thor's goats, and I don't know. It's a lot of fun mythology. And I think the flaws are interesting with like Balder and his weakness to mistletoe. I've always enjoyed that. So I kind of wanted to take elements of the myths and put it into a paladin. Because I felt like Thor feels kind of like a paladin to me. He's strong and he wrecks things. So maybe he's a barbarian. But I kind of wanted to put some spell elements. So there's some stuff in the Channel Divinity where you're basically resistant or vulnerable. I can't remember to all damage, but you're super vulnerable to one type of damage during that time. Which kind of simulates the mistletoe. And you can designate a weapon to have the returning property. So if you want to grab that hammer and throw it, it'll still come back to your hand. And of course, you get lots of lightning spells and stuff like that.
So this product, Oath of the Aesir, was this paladin class tailored for Norse mythology. And did you play much with Norse outside of that? Did you ever run like a Norse themed D&D campaign or play in one? Or
yeah, I did. The group I play with now, we've been playing for about three or 4 years now, and I had run Storm King's Thunder for them, which is kind of a Norse themed campaign. You have giants and runes and magic and elements of lightning and stuff. So after we finished that, I wanted to keep going, and there was all this Norse mythology that sort of is in D&D, but didn't get touched upon a lot. You have 2 giant gods, Surtur and Thrym, who share names of actual giants and ogres in Norse mythology. Right. And so we kind of kept going with that. And the big bad of the campaign was actually Loki. And, we went all the way to level 20, and it involved Surtur being killed and them having to resurrect him to like set things right. And the last dungeon they went in was like a theater that belonged to Loki, where there was this stage and all like different NPCs were puppets and stuff. But it was a lot of fun. And I mean, they went into Surtur's body, and that was a whole dungeon. And so there was like lava, and
Oh wow, that's great.
it was
That's
really cool.
fantastic. Do you have a broader interest in mythology? Is it just pretty much Norse, or does like other mythologies of the world
Yeah.
spark your interest much? Or
Yeah, I think a lot of storytellers and fans of monsters like mythology. There's so many cool monsters in Greek mythology
yeah,
and Norse mythology. I mean, you have Jormungandr, that's world serpent, and you
oh yeah,
have like Neptune. All of Neptune's children are scary monsters. I think I've always kind of liked monsters, and I think that's probably what drew me to D&D. When I was a kid, I used to read the Spiderwick Chronicles books, and they had a field guide. I think Tony Dieter, oh gosh, I don't remember his last name, but he did
Dieter yeah.
Terlizzi. Yeah, there you go. He did. I didn't figure out until this year that he did art for Planescape.
Oh yeah, he did some great Planescape art. Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, and he did like Magic the Gathering art too.
Really? I see. And I didn't know that. It was kind of like my worlds crossed over this year. Because when I was a kid, I would run around with the field guide with all of his art in it. And I'd, pretend to find trolls and stuff in my neighborhood with my friends. And so I think because I always liked the myth and the stories around, like brownies and bogarts and trolls and all that, I enjoy myths for the same reasons.
I'm curious. Have you ever explored some of the? I mean, you're Iranian by ethnically. Have you explored any of the myths from ancient Persia?
Yeah.
You ever brought any of that into your D&D gaming or?
Yeah. I've been thinking about that a lot lately. There's a lot of really good creatures that come from Persian mythology. I mean, the Rock is one of them.
Sure.
Manticores are also Persian, though I think they have wings in 5e, but not in the original lore. There are lots of mythical birds like the Simorgh and the Homa, which is kind of like a phoenix, but it designates like kings, and if a Homa flies over someone, it's like good fortune, and they might be fit to rule. And so there's a lot of really cool potential with Persian myths. And some good monsters in there, and there's some classic monsters in there too. Of course, you have like things like genies, and in 1001 Nights, which is more Persian than Arabic, from what I understand.
Right. Yeah, I'd heard that as well too. I threw that in. I'm personally a big fan of Middle Eastern history and mythology. Although I admit I don't know much about Persian mythology.
It's not as it might not be as robust as like European fantasy, or it might be just that we've explored so much European fantasy that we're more familiar with it. It is harder to find stuff on it, but there's a surprising amount of it.
I think the European fantasy looks so much bigger because we've explored it so much.
Yeah.
Since it was, I mean, in modern era, there's been so much work, but you go back to the, before say the 1800s, I don't think that we would find that it was that much more than a lot of other mythology. I could be wrong. I don't know.
Yeah. And I think there's fun mythology that comes out of studying other things. I feel like there's a few D&D monsters that maybe don't resemble their original myths, but kind of become a lore of their own. Like the Gorgon, I think, is based off of some creature in like a 1920s text that I think technically dates back to like Ethiopia. Now, why Gary didn't call Medusa's Gorgons, I'm not sure. But I love that the Gorgon is, in my mind, a bull that breathes gas and is made of metal and stuff. It's so cool.
Well, it's a great thing about fantasy. We get to rewrite it, reimagine it, and it's fabulous. I always played my orcs as the from Roman mythology.
Hmm.
It's a little unclear, but there's some grounds to think that Orcus might have been a Roman deity, and that
Oh,
the
interesting.
orcs were his or the servants of Orcus. I always thought
Hmm.
that was cool, and
Yeah,
so yeah. Anyway, okay.
it is cool.
We also have a common interest in hell, I believe. You've
Oh
written
yeah, I
a
love
book.
hell.
I love hell. I mean, not really. Like, I don't
It's
really
so
want to go to
cool.
hell, but yeah, within a fantasy world.
Why my war
Oh,
machine is
yeah,
right there.
yeah. Hell is fantastic. So you've written, I think, found at least two products, right? There's the Devil's Advocate, Guide to Infernal Contracts, and then also Hellbound Heists.
Mhm.
Let's start with Infernal Contracts because I'm really curious about what your thinking is about Infernal Contracts.
Yeah, so this was kind of the product that I went to my wife and I said, "Hey, I really want to give this D&D writing thing a shot. I want to commission some art for this. This is how much I'm thinking. I'm not expecting to get any of it back. Are you okay with that?" And she was like, "Yeah, yeah, do this." She's always very supportive and kind. She's like, "This is what you want to do. This is your dream. Go for it. Give it your best shot." So
It's
Gwen,
fabulous.
Gwen,
That's great. That's
yeah,
awesome.
she's amazing. Gwen Bassett, she did the cover for this. I kind of wanted to. I think it was 2 or 3 months before Descent into Avernus released, and I didn't know it was in it, but I knew that it was going to touch on at least a little bit onto Infernal Contracts. So I wanted a supplement that was kind of a deeper dive because I felt like Infernal Contracts are something that we talk about a lot with warlocks and and hell and devils,
Sure.
but that when it comes to the specifics as a DM, what are the rules for that? How does that play out in session? If I want to write one of those, do I have to be a lawyer to make it? And is my goal to trick my player or to challenge their character? And so I jotted down a bunch of ideas. I had taken a health law class that had contract law in it, and so I broke Infernal Contracts down by
It's a good
actual
template.
contract law.
Definitely.
So yeah,
Okay.
it's a cool supplement. It's one I think it's probably the DM's Guild supplement I'm best known for, because I think currently right now that one's sold over 2,500 copies, which on
Wow.
the DM's Guild is quite a lot.
That sounds really great. Yeah, I was curious. Like, what? So, what is Can you kind of walk me through an example of the DM's like how this works in play?
Yeah, yeah. So we'll say that I mean, you're a DM and you have a character who's either a warlock or they want something, and you want to challenge them somehow. You're thinking this is a good time to give them an infernal contract. And while I'm talking, I'm actually pulling it up uh, so I can walk through it. This is called vamping.
Good.
So there are basically
Take a
five.
moment if you need, Justice. Take a moment. It's all
So
good.
there are five components of a contract according to contract law.
Okay.
There's consideration.
I'm on the edge of my seat here.
The contract law. It's so interesting. There's consideration, which is basically the exchange of payment that has to happen. You need something from the person who's going to make the contract. Now, we usually think of infernal contracts as soul or no soul. Either you're pledged to me, or I get something really dastardly, or you don't get it. So I give a bunch of things in this supplement on other things you can give, both mechanically and socially. So you could give them money. Maybe the devil wants 66% of all of your future adventuring payments, which is pretty steep.
Yeah.
Or
That
maybe
sounds like a
they
Lucasfilm royalty to me.
right, yeah, maybe they want your vitality. Maybe they want hit points from you, or something as simple as your name. because the devil wants to use your name for something. So there are a lot of different ways you can role play these out in this scenario.
Well, I love the idea of hit points because now I just want to flip that around. I want to have like this devil in a campaign who just got like 1,000 hit points because, that's what this devil did is like got all these contracts. All these people had to pay hit points. Like, what is that really? Don't worry about it. Just play the game.
Yeah. I mean, and there's some things as simple as like taking someone's beauty. If they think their character is very good looking, that, wherever they go, they're going to be seen as not beautiful. And then you have things like, I have a whole table on life years as consideration. So the idea that if you don't want to come up with this kind of vague thing that you're not sure how much it's worth, you can determine how much it's worth in a percentage of somebody's life. So you can tell the devil, hey, I'll give you 1 hour of my time. You can take that hour and you can take it when you want to, or we can shave that hour off of my life. And so the more you give of your life, the better a deal you can get. And so I tier out different offers by that principle, basically, that if you give more of your life, you're going to get something better, and you get something better if you're not desperate. So if you're in, the heat of the moment, you're fighting the boss and somebody dies and you want to resurrect them right then and there. Well, a devil can come in and pause time for a little bit. You can negotiate, but you're desperate in that moment because you want to beat this boss and your best friend just went down. You're going to have to trade something a little bit nicer than usual to get that. Because without it, you're in a worse off position, which makes that devil in a better position, which means they have all the bargaining power and such and such. So it's full of stuff like that, and mechanics for fine print and role play help for players that make deals and how they feel if they've lost a soul. Are they the kind of person who is hopeless after that, or do they get really reckless, like in The Big Fish, where Ewan McGregor's character knows the date of his death. He knows nothing else can kill him, so he lives his life way more recklessly and takes way more chances. So maybe that's how your character is.
Right. That sounds great. That sounds like a lot of fun. Bravo.
Thanks.
And Hellbound Heists, another book that has to do with hell. And I understand there's a train in hell. Is that?
Yeah.
This you definitely need to explain.
Yeah. So Brian Holmes led this project. There were a bunch of different authors on it. Many of them, all of them, really great DMs Guild writers. And they're basically, the whole goal was to have high tier adventures, to do something after you beat Descent into Avernus. So we wanted to give a look at each of the other layers of the 9 hells. And so I did a tier 4 train heist, because they were all heist themed, in Cania, which is the 8th layer of hell. And so in this adventure, you and your level 17 companions get on the Canian Hellfire Limited, which is this Batorian green steel black locomotive that travels along this glacier in hell, and you're trying to get something before it reaches its next stop, essentially. And you can actually take the different pieces of the train cars, and switch them around. So if you're a DM and you want to challenge your players by giving them a certain train car, making the train longer or shorter, you can do that. There's a memory car where these mind flayer trios, they collect memories, and they think that the memory tastes better than the brain. So all of these memories that have been traded to Mephistopheles and Infernal Contracts are there. And the players can bump into the memories and accidentally take them. So you might leave this train car with the memory of a half-elf's apple crumble recipe that you never made.
Wow.
But you have a fond memory of smelling it and baking it, and it was from a famous baker or something. So it's really cool.
Sounds like a game of free market. If you played that RPG with a lot of stuff about memories and stuff like that. Yeah, Luke Crane, Jared Sorensen collaboration. Really cool. So you so is a heist involved? You guys, did the player characters try to rob this train, perhaps,
Yeah,
or
there
something?
is a train robbery involved, and I won't spoil what it's for. But there is also a rival train robbery from another archdevil at the same time. So you have kind of Wild West devils, riding nightmares and bringing their infernal war machines to the side of the train, and kicking open the door and saying, "Ugh, we're here too. Put all the souls in the bag," sort of thing going on at the same time. So it just makes it so much worse too, because it's tier 4 and everything is so oppressive, because you have so many spells and resources that you have like this Nalfashi like walking around and flying to the upper cars.
And
um
now we circle back to the country western music theme.
yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, so there's the Nashville right there.
Yeah. So who's the let's see, who's playing the soundtrack? Which country western singer is singing the soundtrack to this adventure?
It's got to be Josh Turner, right? Because he did Long Black Train, so it
Okay.
has to be. Yeah.
Perfect. Perfect. Well, that seems like a reasonable segue, given how dark it is, to go to horror. We are going in reverse order from the list I made of your credits. Okay. Um, you worked on a product called Step Right Up, and I saw in the description milk themed horror, and I just like, okay, I'm probably showing ignorance of my age or something like that. But what is milk themed horror?
No ignorance involved. It's a very experimental genre. It's not very lucrative. I'll start with that. So I don't know. People ask me sometimes, why did you write this adventure? And I can't remember why I thought this was a great idea. But I really wanted to do a carnival horror. And something about milk just seemed so disgusting that I wanted to make it a critical element. So I took the same principle from the train in Hellbound Heists, but I made it into a carnival basically, and went into a different genre. So Step Right Up, you are going to this circus called Mr. Bones Big Top Euphoria, and he's this esteemed dairy tycoon who sells this sweet milk recipe. And so the cool thing about this adventure is all of the attractions in here have two. They're basically two in one. So at some point, the carnival gets spoiled, and all of the attractions spoil with them. So you might go to the Tunnel of Love, and it's your classic, rowboat and music and happy. But the second time you go in, all of the water is different, and the singing frogs are now Banderhobs singing Tin Pan Alley's "Hello, My Darling," but in these low growls as they tear apart your swan boat.
And for some reason, I'm smelling sour milk right now. This is
Yeah,
like,
that's basically what. Yeah.
oh, oh, gross.
So Jack Kaiser has done so much, fantasy horror art, but he said this is the first project he's worked on where he almost gagged while researching. So he's looking up all these pictures of spoiled milk and drawing these awful clowns that I'm asking him to commission for me.
Oh my God, that's
He did a
hilarious.
great job though.
Oh my gosh.
But yeah, that one was actually a DM's Guild staff pick, and I think part of that is because at the beginning, I spent a significant amount of time talking about how to run horror at the table, making sure you clarify boundaries with everybody, because some people can't handle body horror, or they have something in their life that makes it really bad for them. So I talk about how to have those conversations, how to have tools at the table to make those games more fun for everybody. And I actually ran this game on a Beadle and Grimm stream. And one of the players actually had something in their lines and veils. I did a survey before that is really prominent in this adventure. And had I not done that survey before, that stream could have been a really, not only a disaster to find out in the moment, but it was a really positive experience because I knew that information beforehand.
Well, by the way, as an aside, good on you for being very aware of this this wonderful new development in role playing, that we're trying to be more conscious of
Yeah.
I mean, back when I was playing in the 70s, we just never worried about that stuff, and it is good to see the community embracing safety tools. And it's for me, it's been trying to get into the habit of doing it,
Yeah.
but I welcome the development. And so, hey, you mentioned something earlier that just reminded me. You said that like the 666, the Mephistar adventure involves some really high level characters. So you have and you mentioned a couple of times high level characters running high level campaigns.
Yeah.
We had a question from our community post, which is, what is your best advice for taking a published module adventure and transitioning into higher level play beyond what the module gives you, if the players want to continue? This is from TBK Zord on Twitter.
Yeah. Yeah. So Hellbound Heists is a great example of that, because that's one thing we're thinking about. How can we give people something new? How can we let them explore more of the hells? And that's kind of what happened with my Storm King's Thunder campaign. Is they wanted to keep going. They wanted to go to level 20, and at the time there weren't any 20th level Wizards adventures. Later they released Dungeons of the Mad Mage, but that wasn't out at the time. So one thing I would say, I've considered doing a whole series of products like this for each hardcover called Rising Villains. Haven't gotten around to it because time is elusive. But I would say that by the time you finish an adventure, for the most part, your table is going to look so much different from everybody else's. So as a DM, you need to see the threads before you reach the end. You need to know what themes interest your players, what plot points are not likely to wrap up by the end of this, and how can you draw those out. In our Storm King's Thunder campaign, I introduced a villain who was the brother of one of the characters. His name was Cantu, and he was really plugged into all the Frost Giants, and he wanted to basically unite all of the Frost Giant tribes for like having been moved into the cold and all kinds of stuff like that. What happened was during the game, they went to focus on the larger threat and ended up pursuing fire giants instead of frost giants. So I asked myself, while the players are going out, while the characters are resolving this plot, what is happening to the other one? How is the world changing? What is Cantu doing? And how is he preparing for them when they inevitably come his way? What does that threat look like as it gets bigger? So I think if you're running a campaign and you want to keep going afterwards, if say it's a 10 level campaign, you need to start looking around like level 7 and start laying the framework for after this campaign. Think, when the big threat is eliminated, who does that create a power vacuum for? Or, while they're fighting something, what's been happening? Or is the big threat a precursor to something else? Because there's no cooler moment than defeating the big boss that you thought was, the baddest character in the whole lands, and figuring out they're just a lieutenant to the real threat.
Exactly. That's right. Yeah, there's always more. I mean,
there's always more.
That's our job, is to just always present. There's more stuff behind. It's like a false summit on a mountain. Like you think the summit, like, oh no, that was just a knoll on the way to the top.
Right. And then when in doubt, you can just throw them into an entirely different plane.
Oh yeah.
Fresh.
If I have an old rule that if I kind of get stuck in the moment, like just throw a nasty random encounter at them, and
just buy some time.
Buy some time for the imagination to kick in.
Yeah.
The thing about D&D. Okay, so hey, let's go on to in your Baldur's Gate city encounters. This looked interesting. Tell us about this project, and you have something called the tension meter. I was curious how that worked.
Yeah. So this is the DM's Guild Adepts. They usually do a product, an encounters project for each book, where for Waterdeep, they did city encounters. For Rime of the Frostmaiden, they had encounters in the like in Frozen Far, basically. And when they did Avernus, they did encounters in Avernus. Well, the first 5 levels of the campaign are set in Baldur's Gate, and there's a huge gazetteer in that. But we wanted to make something that hit every one of those neighborhoods, but also had random encounters so that when you were traveling in the city, it felt real, and it kind of hit those themes harder of Baldur's Gate. Why is Baldur's Gate is like the Gotham of D&D. Why is it different from Waterdeep? What themes make it feel different to your players? And we talked about this a little bit before we got on the call, but I'll look in board games and for inspiration. And a very popular game is Gloomhaven that I'm sure you're familiar with. Yeah, Isaac has been at Gen Con every year. In the past 3 or 4, I've seen him there. And he has something in his game for the market. And if your characters have a better reputation, they get a discount in the store. And if they have a worse reputation, they actually pay more. So what I wanted to do was have some sort of scale where the players could affect the city and they would get different encounters as a result. So I picture Baldur's Gate as a place that you can never really fix. There's always a power group there that's making it worse for everyday citizens, whether it's the Flaming Fist or the guild, they're like criminal underground. So with the tension meter, there are 5 scales, and after every random encounter or big events in the campaign, you bump it in one direction or the other. So that affects all the random encounters. So if you consistently side with the law in the city, they start getting brazen and will, almost brutally punish minor misdemeanors. Whereas if you consistently side against the Flaming Fist and start helping out criminals or obstructing the law, you get to the point where cultists feel like they can do their rituals out in the center of the street, and you'll see stuff like, like a Merkelite saying, "Here, baptize yourself in this fountain, and we'll hand you these, curving swords." And so it's really cool. So you find out that you kind of want Baldur's Gate to sit right in the center where you can maintain the status quo.
Right. Yeah, I can see players like, okay, we did one for this side last time. Now this session we got to go over here and swing the gates. Or you just embrace one side or the other and say, yeah, we want chaos and anarchy in the streets.
Yeah. I drew it on the board in my group, and so they would always stress out whenever it would move in one direction too much. They're like, it's getting bad. That's a skull on that side. We need to be careful.
Oh yeah, they were like, what's the skull mean? Let's get there. Hey, we had a question from our live stream chat from AlphaStream 1. Question: when you look back on your favorite collaborative projects, what factors led to the projects being great?
Oh, that's a good question. That comes from Teos. How you doing, Teos?
Hi, Teos. Welcome to
things that make my collaborations great. I really enjoyed my Hellbound Heist collaboration. I wasn't the project lead on that, which I think is kind of like when I was in theater. I always liked you get to show off in the lead roles, but you almost have more fun in the ensemble. And I think that's kind of how it is when you're a project lead versus a writer on a project. Is I love the collaboration, the getting in the Discord and bouncing ideas off of people. I feel like D&D is it's a team sport. It's all about the party. It's about the group. The group makes decisions together. I mean, you have character arcs, but everything you do together, and you're made better for it. Not nobody. People can. The barbarian can take the troll alone, but they can't take 5 trolls alone. And I feel like projects are similar. You'll always be better for working together with someone else. And those moments of passing an idea back and forth, of generating ideas with someone and saying, well, what do you think about this? And here's why I think that. I've had the pleasure of working with some really, really great people. At no point have I ever felt like any of the people on my teams had been oppressive or not open to my ideas and shutting each other off. I feel like because of that, we have always made the projects the best that they can be. And it was because of that time that we spent generating ideas together, and also sometimes you just get to hang out and make jokes with each other and get to know each other's people. And I think that's the best part of projects is I mean, it's the writer's room.
Right. Well, since collaboration has come up, I want to skip up to Secrets of the Zentarum, which because two of your collaborators in this project, Celeste Konovich and Sadie Lowry, have been past guests on this show.
And Laura.
And Laura, what was Laura on this one? I don't know.
Laura was the editor on this one, yeah.
Well, oh yes, indeed. Okay, yes, and Laura Hertzbringer, who was my guest just last week. And so, well, since we're on the collaboration, what was it like working with Laura, Celeste, and Sadie?
It was awesome. Laura, I'll start with Laura. Laura's a great editor. She will fight you on things, and you have to choose your battles very carefully with Laura, because she will tell you why she's right. And she is always right. You have to know that first. Going into a battle with Laura, it's never about, is this correct? It's is this what I want, more than it being correct.
Right.
Laura consistently, she delivers that tone throughout all of the document. She restructures things in such a way that they flow better. What I'm describing is a great editor, and
yes,
Laura is a great editor. And for someone to take 10 different writers' work and make it seem as if one person wrote that book, that's a star editor, and that's what Laura does every time. On top of that, she is present in the Discord. She doesn't wait until she gets something to start saying opinions. Laura will offer feedback early on and say, have you thought of doing it this way? She'll talk about ideas, and Laura's ideas will make it into the project because she's invested in it, and she's collaborative. It's not passing through a production chain. It's everybody's in this room together, tinkering away at it. Celeste,
and by the way, she struck me. I've obviously not had the chance to work with Laura like as a writer-editor relationship, but having her as a guest on Fireside last week, she struck me as like, my instincts were like, this gal's a good editor. I can tell.
Oh yeah, she is. She is sharp as a tack too. She is my favorite editor I've worked with so far. But don't tell her I said that, because then she won't let me. She won't let me have something in my next project. I'll have to fight harder for it. She'll say, "You said I was the best." Sadie and Celeste, I was over a couple chapters in the book, but Celeste and Sadie both contributed to chapter 1, which was player options.
And maybe we should back up just a little bit and explain, what is this book about? Secrets of Zentarum. I know it's a successor to Candlekeep, which is like, how does that? Yeah.
So these books were kind of taking something that we feel like people sort of get in 5th edition, but it maybe hasn't gotten the attention it needs because word counts are real, and D&D books can only be so many pages without breaking a production cycle. So we felt like the Zentarim they show up in a lot of campaigns, but people aren't sure where the Zentarim stand in 5th edition. They're kind of this evil organization in older editions, and now in 5th edition, you can choose them as a faction, and they're sort of evil.
And we should say that this is all within the world of Faerun, right?
Yeah,
Forgotten Realms? Yeah.
It's all Forgotten Realms. Ed Greenwood was a consultant on both of these projects. So one of the things that we can always stand by is that these projects are reviewed by the creator of the Forgotten Realms. And not only is the lore accurate, you get new lore in there that hasn't been spelled out, which is really cool. So there's things in the lore chapters where, for example, I love Manchun, who's this wizard who has kind of this endless supply of clones that keep popping up even when you think you've gotten all of them. And Ed will tell you, hey, here are the 3 clones that I know are out in the Forgotten Realms right now. So you can add these to that section. I'm like, oh my gosh, there's a clone. Where? And he's like, oh yeah, he's just chilling over here, pretending he's not Manchun and drinking and having fun. Or he'll, for example, there's the Sword Coast Adventures guide, it mentions that this kind of enigmatic leader rose to the top of the Zentarium during this period of turmoil, the Paraghost. And in that book, it paints him as this mysterious person who nobody really knows. And so we got to flesh that character out and talk about his origin, which is actually really, really thorough. It's not what you would expect for this character based on how they'd write, and it's really cool. That stat block is ridiculous, and I can't spoil why. You need to check out the book, but that stat block is ridiculous for a lot of options, and it's super cool. And that was designed by Brittany, and I can't remember Brittany's last name, but she's at FN Dungeon Mom on Twitter.
Oh, so I had a question, and it's funny because Cryptic Parlor on chat just asked the very question I had. Cryptic Parlor says the Paraghost is my favorite part of the book, and my question is, what's the Paraghost?
Okay. So the Paraghost is this man. There has always been kind of a power struggle with the Zentarium leadership, and it goes all the way back to Zental Keep, which was founded and built upon kind of backstabbing and betrayal. So it's no surprise that the organization that shares kind of the same name has all of the same problems. People constantly betraying one another, or looking over their shoulder, seeing how they can one-up each other. Throughout D&D's complicated history of periods of magic being gone and gods dying and people dying and being resurrected, the Zentarium kind of got scattered and was looking for leadership. And this basically a general called the Paraghost. He always wears his helmet. He has chalk white armor, and he flies on a steed with a winged saddle, and has a talking greatsword called Determination. He is the leader of the Zentarium. He's apparently a really good strategist. He's kind of he will not make careless decisions in battle. He will have Zentarium retreat instead of sacrificing them for his own pride. And so he's the current leader, and he's an absolute badass. So I think he's really cool. We got some art commissioned of him for this book because he doesn't have any art currently. He's on the cover of the book, flying on his horse, whose name I can't remember. And he's also got another piece in the book.
Nice. Excellent. I want to ask you, I know you said you can't say much about the MCDM's Arcadia. You can't. I just really want to ask you.
I can talk a little bit about it. Yeah.
Generalities, maybe. So it says that there are 3 races you developed inspired by sleep and dreams. So what's a race like that's inspired by sleep and dreams?
Yeah. So I have this product that I wanted to do on the DM's Guild for a while, that was all about sleep and dreams, because you have like night hags going into people's dreams, and you have dreams coming up as kind of this source of prophecy or foreshadowing. But I quickly found that I was very busy between my job and my part-time job and writing for the DM's Guild. It's just it's hard to make these supplements happen sometimes. And when it came time to pitch to MCDM, I knew I wanted to do these races, and I'm so glad that this pitch resonated with them. So there are 3 races in here. There is one called a lucidling, which is basically since beholders create other beholders through dreaming, what happens when a beholder dreams about a person? You get kind of an alien sort of creature that maybe looks like a beholder or an aboleth or whichever kind of aberration that dreams about him. And so they might share some of those abilities. So they look really weird. They're all different from each other, and they're kind of ageless. Then you have the other 2 there's one called a sand speaker, which is like, they're kind of like spies almost, that come from this kind of on the border of creation and dreams and stuff. So they can take on a sand form and go underneath doors and stuff, and they can enter people's dreams by using the dream spell at a cost. They have to be really close to the person. So it's kind of like you can play Inception in D&D. You can play
Right.
a sand speaker and go to the king's chambers and sneak past the guards and then go in their brain and start looking for the information they have.
Right. Right. Right.
And then the last one is called a Somnian, and they're basically the architects of dreams. So if you make dreams for other people, what does that look like, in the real world? If your character leaves the place where they make dreams, how do those abilities manifest in real life? So, and they have like starry complexion. They kind of look like little humanoid galaxies walking around. So they're really cool, kind of out there races that I think a lot of people are going to like.
That does sound great. That sounds fantastic. My mind went to dragons. I always thought of dragons as being well, they sleep a lot. So what do they do when they're sleeping? They're dreaming, and always in my Chaldea world always had interesting things that could happen in dragons' dreams, and they could pull you into their dreams, and now you're in a world of their making that works by their rules and so on and so forth. So
yeah, it's super cool.
Cool topic. But we are running out of time. I have one more question I want to ask you. Make sure I get this in. So Dungeons and Dragons is, well, one of my favorite games. Magic and D&D are my favorite games of all time. So, and I'm often humbled thinking about the long history of Dungeons and Dragons and all the people that worked on it over the years. And so what do you hope to bring to Dungeons and Dragons? Because you must feel the same way. So many people that worked on this game. How do I fit into this? Or maybe you don't worry about that. What's what?
That's an interesting question. It's I think it's more subconscious than conscious for me, and I think what I want to bring to D&D is, if there's one running theme of all of my things in my portfolio, are I always add something new to my project, something that I don't feel like has been done a lot in the past, or has never been done before. Maybe a niche take on a subject like Infernal Contracts, or bringing a concept that's not part of D&D, like something from Gloomhaven into a tension meter. And so I think that whatever I bring to D&D, I want it to be something that when you look back on the game, somebody says, remember when that person did this? And it's unequivocally that thing that I made, because it hasn't been done before, and kind of the starting point for something. Aside from that, being, having an Iranian father and being an Iranian American, I want to bring some of that to D&D, some of the culture, some of the mythology. It's something a lot of people don't know about. People don't know what the Middle East looks like. All of our perceptions of it are shaped by media, which, since 2001 has not been extremely equal in coverage. And so I want to show people the beauty of the culture, and show them how, they're already using Persian monsters like the Manticore, and tell them why those stories are cool, and just show them a little bit of like what's that side of the pond looks like.
Oh, I think that's fantastic. I love Middle Eastern history and mythology. I think it'd be fantastic to see more of that brought out and recognized for where its roots as opposed to just being a monster in a monster manual. To say, hey, this is here is some interesting take on Persian mythology, folklores from that region, what have you. So great. Well, and by the way, I think that you are accomplishing what you want to be known for, or what you want to bring to this game. I think, in my brief time looking through your portfolio and talking today, it's clear that you've got a fantastic imagination and a lot to offer this community. I think you're I'm really impressed.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. I've worked hard on it, and that feels good to hear, especially coming from you. So I really appreciate that. You've done so much, for this hobby already, and I cannot wait until I can go back to Gen Con.
Well, be sure and look me up. If
I will.
Once we're all at Gen Con again, be sure and look me up. We'll get together.
Yeah.
It'd be great to see you there. All right. Well, this wraps up another episode of Fireside with Peter Adkison on Gen Con TV. Thank you for joining us. This also wraps up this season of Fireside, and we're still figuring out when Fireside will be back, under what sort of guise, but we are going to go on a break from Fireside for a period of time. For me personally, I have launched a new project on YouTube called Chaldea, World of Chaldea. Check it out. And so I'm going to be focusing on that through this launch period into early next year, at least. We will, Gen Con TV is going to continue on with all sorts of great programming. Just as a reminder, we have on Fridays at 2 p.m., we have Bonsai and Emma and Derek and Isabella Von Gool for Table Takes. And this week, we have special guest author and RPG researcher Hawk Robinson, who will be on to talk about his new book. Mondays at 6 p.m. Pacific time, we have Board Games with the Brothers Murph. On Wednesdays at 1:30 Pacific time, we have Board Games with This Game Gets Dicey. If you miss any of our shows, you can find them on YouTube and the Gen Con video channel within a day or so of them being broadcast. Also, all my old episodes with early people who worked on Magic the Gathering and Dungeons and Dragons back in the day. If you want to connect with other Gen Con fans, be sure and join the Discord server for Gen Con. And please remember to follow, subscribe, turn on notifications, tell your friends about us. We'd like to have you back. We'd like to see you here on a regular basis. And thanks once again to our guest, Justice Arman, our studio manager, Marcus Mays, our producer, Derek Gooder, to Dungeon Masters Guild for introducing us to new voices in Dungeons and Dragons, to Gen Con TV for hosting us, and most of all, thank you for joining.